You can see in week 2 homework that there's two separate items here for section 5.2. Just wanted to make sure I point that out so that you recognize it. Section 5.2 homework. This piece is multiple choice fill in the blank problems, and then this piece, the one that I want to focus on in this video, is some Excel work. So we'll go to that one and take a look at it. It says for each of the probability distributions presented below, use Microsoft Excel to calculate expected value and standard deviation of the probability distribution. And then you have some questions to answer about each of them. So we have 3 scenarios here, and in each of the scenarios it indicates outcomes and the probability of each outcome occurring. So we're going to translate that information into Microsoft Excel and learn to use Microsoft Excel to calculate the expected value, which is just the mean, and also the standard deviation. So we're going to use the same example problem that we had in the 5.1 video. The outcomes are, how many heads do you get after flipping a coin 3 times? Well, you could get no heads, 1 head, 2 head, or 3 heads. So we have the numerical results here, 0 through 3, and their associated probabilities. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to first start by calculating the mean. Now here's the equation to calculate the mean of a probability distribution. This symbol right here that looks like a giant fancy E is actually a Greek letter that we use to mean sum. So what this is telling us is that the average is equal to the sum of all the x's, that's each individual outcome here, 0, 1, 2, 3, times its own probability, p of x. So I have to take 0, multiply it by the 0.125, the 1 times its probability, 2 times its probability, 3 times its probability, and then again this sum symbol means add those together. So here's how I'm going to do that in Excel. I'm going to label each column as I do it so we remember what we did. So this column is going to be x times p of x. That's what's going to happen in this column. So here's how I can do that in Excel. The equal sign is going to be hugely useful. I'm going to hit equals. And then what I'm going to do is I can tell it what 2 things I want to add or subtract or multiply or divide together. What I want to do, as you see in this equation, is x times p of x. That's this cell right here, B2, which contains 0. And then times is your asterisk. That's on the 8 up top on your keyboard. So Shift 8 gives you the asterisk. And I need to multiply that by its probability, so I'm going to click on cell C2, which is its probability. So it's going to take whatever is in B2 and multiply it by whatever is in C2. At that point I'm going to hit enter, and it calculates it, 0. Well, yeah, 0 times anything is just 0. Now I can continue that process by going equals that cell times that cell, enter. I can keep going through that process, but one thing that Excel does for me, I'm going to delete that one, is it allows me to take an equation I put in and copy it down. So this cell right here uses these 2 cells to make its calculation. See this little, when I highlight this cell, the little box in the lower right hand corner, I'm going to hover over it, it turns into a plus sign. I'm going to click and hold on it and drag it down and then let go. Here's what it's going to do. It's going to take each row underneath the original row I used to calculate and perform the same calculation. You'll notice when I click on this, what does it say it's doing? B3 times C3. Click on this, B4 times C4. Click on the next one, B5 times C5. It took whatever I did and just looked at each next row down as I drug it down to each row. So that makes things a little quicker for us, especially if we had a lot of data. So these were all the x times p of x. Well, what I need to do next now is, according to this symbol right here, is to sum them together, meaning I need to add all these values together. Again, Excel allows us to do this fairly simply. So I'm going to come down underneath all of this. Right here I'm going to write the word sum so that I know what's going on. And I'm going to right justify it so that I know it's connected to that cell. What I'm going to do is, again, hit my equal sign and type in sum. There's a function in Excel that allows me to do a sum. I'm going to type in sum and then a parenthesis. What I can now do is go highlight all of the values I want to be added together. Close the parenthesis and hit enter. And there's my sum, which is also my end result. That's my mean. So I'm going to relabel this. Instead of sum, this is now my mean because it's the sum of all the x times px's. So there we go. There is the expected value. We expect to, on average, get 1.5 heads if we flip a coin 3 times. So that's the mean. But now what we want to do is we want to figure out how to calculate the standard deviation. This takes a lot more steps, or several more steps. In this case, I still have a sum, but the whole sum is underneath the square root symbol. But if I work my way inside out, here's what it's telling me to do. First, take all x's, that's the 0, 1, 2, and 3, and subtract the mean from them. The mean is what I just calculated. I'm supposed to take all of these values and subtract 1.5 from them. Once I'm done with that, I'm supposed to square all those numbers. And after I square them, I'm supposed to multiply each of them by their associated probabilities. Once I'm done with that, I need to add all those values together and take the square root, and then I have my standard deviation. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by labeling this column as x minus mean. And to do that, I'm going to hit my equal sign, and my x is 0 minus, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, minus, I want to subtract this 1.5 from it. So I'm going to click on this 1.5. Okay? And I'm going to do something here that I'll explain in a moment. I am going to hit my F4 key. You'll notice that when I hit F4, instead of saying D6, it says money sign D, money sign 6. I'll explain what that means in just a second. So that is x minus mean. I'm going to hit enter, and we expect a negative 1.5 because 0 minus 1.5 is negative 1.5. So just like I did with this column, I can now grab this and hover over that box and drag, click and hold and drag down. Now, if you remember from this column here, it just continued to use each next column or each next row down. Well, if that's the case, it would follow this row down here as well. But what I want you to notice is when I hit F4 and put the dollar signs there, as I move down, it's using each next value in the B column. Notice up here I go from B2 to B3 to B4 to B5. But the D6 never changes because of the money sign. So it's always taking each of these values and subtracting 1.5 from it. So now I'm supposed to take that, the x minus mean, and square it. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to take this value right here, and I need to square it. So in this cell, I'm going to type in equals, and I'm going to click on this cell to select that value. And then I need to use the caret symbol. The caret symbol is above the 6 on your keyboard. So shift 6. So that's this cell, E2, which is the negative 1.5, to the power of 2. And I'll hit enter. So it'll square that. Again, take that and drag it down so that it does it for each of these values in that column. Well, and lastly, before I do the sum, I have to then take each of those and multiply by their associated probability. So this column right here simply becomes x minus mean squared times p of x. So again, I need to hit my equal sign, and I'm supposed to take the squared values and multiply them by their associated probabilities. Hit enter, take this and drag it down. Now that I have that whole string of mathematics multiplied, subtracted, and squared together, I need to take the sum of it. There's that sum symbol again. So I'm going to do it the same way, right under here. I'm going to hit equals, type in sum, parenthesis. I'm going to select everything I want to add together, hit parenthesis again, and hit enter. So that is the sum of all the x minus mu squareds times p of x's. The last thing I need to do is the square root. To do that, what I'm going to do is in the next column down, this equals, and you type in SQRT, and this means square root, open parenthesis, I want to take the square root of that number right there, 0.75, and close that off and hit enter. And there's my standard deviation. I'll label that SD for standard deviation. So that's the process you go through in Microsoft Excel to calculate your mean and your standard deviation. The way I set it up, what's really nice is, since I didn't type in any values, I simply collected cells that I was adding, subtracting, multiplying, and squaring. If I change any of these values, if I change this 2 to an 8, watch how everything afterwards changes, because it then uses that 8 on all my calculations instead of the 2. And then I can go back to the 2, and it'll go back to the original calculations. So there's the demonstration on how to calculate mean and standard deviation in Microsoft Excel to allow you to take a look at these three scenarios, calculate the mean and standard deviation to be able to then answer the questions.